The gratitude of kings is a collar of debt. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the starship Ledger, a vessel built for accounting, not war. Before her, the planet Kalen shimmered a jewel of blue and green, now wrapped in the shimmering chains of a legal fiction. The Kalenese had been saved from a stellar flare by the enigmatic Zathi, a species that traded in obligation. Now the Zathi fleet blockaded the system not with weapons, but with liens. They called it the tithe of gratitude, a perpetual tax on every life, every harvest, every breath taken in the stars' renewed light. Rostova's mission was not to break the blockade, but to break the contract in the Aurora court. "They are broadcasting again," Commander Lieutenant Gia said, her voice tight. "The daily accounting." On the main screen, the Zathi High Justicar appeared, its form a cascade of crystalline facets that refracted the bridge lights. Its voice was a soothing chime that spoke of inescapable numbers. "For the gift of your son, we ask only a token, a measure of your labor, a portion of your light. It is the logic of the universe. A debt must be honored." The Zathi's power was a slow, crushing avalanche of legalism. "Magnify their lead vessel's energy signature." Rostova ordered, her eyes narrowing. "Ledger, what do you see?" The ship's AI, its consciousness woven into the very structure of the vessel, responded. Its voice was calm, a stark contrast to the simmering anger on the bridge. "The Zathi flagship, the Abacus of Souls, draws 1.2 terawatts from Kalen's orbital mirror array. The same array they gifted the Kalenese to stabilize their star. The power is redirected to the Zathi fleet for administrative and protective services." Rostova's fist clenched. "So they charge the Kalenese for the energy used to enforce the debt the Kalenese owe them for that very energy. A perfect circle of servitude." She looked at Gia. "Prepare a civilian channel intercept. I want to hear it from the ground." The bridge crew moved with quiet efficiency, their movements a testament to long years of disciplined service. They were accountants and auditors in uniform, humanity's answer to predators who used laws as weapons. This fleet taught by numbers and remembered by ledgers, never by collars. A voice flickered across the comms, a Kalenese farmer arguing with a local Zatha tithe collector. The rains failed in the high plains. The farmer pleaded, his voice worn thin. "The yield is half. We cannot meet the gratitude quota." The Zathi official's reply was without malice, a simple statement of fact. "The sun shines because of the Zathe. Your gratitude is not contingent on the weather. The ledger must balance." Rostova felt a familiar cold anger settle in her stomach. Humanity had learned that some chains were not forged of iron, but of ink, Ledger Rostova said, turning from the screen. "Run a full-spectrum analysis of the Zathi tithe doctrine. Cross-reference all known precedents in the Aurora Court archives. I want to know every time they've used this gratitude model. I need to find the crack in their perfect circle." The AI's light on the central console pulsed a steady, reassuring blue. "Analysis initiated, Commander. Estimated completion 3 cycles. The Zathi have refined this method over centuries. It is legally robust." "Robust, not unbreakable," Rostova countered. She paced the length of the command deck, the soft hum of the ship, a familiar comfort. "They operate on the principle of a gift freely given, creating an unpayable debt. But a gift, by definition, cannot come with compelled reciprocation. That is not a gift. It is a loan." Gia looked up from her console. "They call it a moral obligation, Commander. The court has historically recognized such claims, especially when a species' survival is at stake." This was the core of the problem. The Zathi method was a masterpiece of exploitation, wrapped in the language of benevolence. Rostova knew that a direct challenge would fail. She needed a new angle, a way to reframe the entire debate. The Zathi expected a legal fight over contract law. They would not expect an audit. Their entire system was built on the perception of their own generosity. She stopped at the edge of the command platform, the starfield vast and indifferent before her. "They've accounted for everything," she murmured. "Every life saved, every watt of energy provided. They've built a fortress of numbers." "Indeed," Ledger replied. "Their accounting is impeccable. Every transaction is recorded on a public immutable ledger for the entire quadrant to see. It is their primary source of legitimacy." Rostova smiled faintly, a flicker of an idea taking root. "A public ledger," she repeated. "Impeccable accounting." She turned to her crew. "That's it. We aren't going to argue the debt. We are going to audit the gift." A confused silence fell over the bridge. Officer Kenji, the ship's legal counsel, stepped forward. "Commander, their ledgers are flawless. To challenge them is to challenge the public record itself. It would be seen as an act of bad faith." Rostova's eyes gleamed with a cold fire. "We won't challenge the record. We will add to it." She tapped her console, bringing up a schematic of the Kalen system. The Zathi saved Kalen from a coronal mass ejection, a natural event. They deployed a solar shield and mirror array, a magnificent feat of engineering. The Kalenese were and are genuinely grateful. But the Zathi have framed this as a singular, instantaneous event, a gift delivered at a single point in time. She zoomed in on the star. But it isn't. The threat was not a one-time event. The star is still unstable. The mirror array requires constant maintenance, constant realignment, constant energy. The Zatha are not just administrators of a past gift. They are performing an ongoing service. Gia caught on first, and a service has costs: labor, materials, energy. Rostova nodded. "Precisely. The Zathi have presented the Kalenese with a bill for the original rescue. They have conveniently omitted the invoice for the ongoing protection." She could feel the pieces locking into place, the shape of a new strategy forming in her mind. This was not about malice. It was about the cold, hard math of reciprocity. Their piety was a weapon, and she would turn it back on them. "Ledger," she commanded, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "Begin a full-cost accounting of the Zathi's operations in this system. Log every maintenance cycle on the mirror array. Calculate the energy expenditure of their fleet. Itemize the labor of their crews. We are going to present the Zathi with a bill for their services. A bill so large, so meticulously documented, it will dwarf the Kalenese debt." Kenji's eyes widened. "It's a mirror justice gambit. You're going to use their own methods against them." "I'm going to use their own numbers," Rostova corrected. "The Zatha pride themselves on their flawless accounting. We will simply complete their ledger for them. We will show the Aurora Court that this is not a relationship of benefactor and debtor. It is a partnership. And in a partnership, both sides have costs." The AI's voice was calm, but Rostova could detect a hint of something new in its tone. A trace of analytical satisfaction. "Commander, the Zathi will not simply accept our accounting. They will challenge our right to even conduct such an audit." "Let them," Rostova said, a predator's smile touching her lips. "That is exactly what I want. I want them to stand before the court and argue that their labor has no value. I want them to declare on the public record that their services are worthless." A new path was clear, not of warfare, but of paper warfare. On the ground, a child looked up at the sky, tracing the shimmering lines of the Zathi orbital network. She didn't understand the numbers or the laws. She only knew that her parents sighed more than they used to, that the harvest festivals were smaller. She knew the sky saviors now felt like sky wardens, their beautiful shining web a cage. She just wanted to see the stars again without the silver lines in the way. Rostova watched the feed the child's upturned face, a stark reminder of the stakes. This wasn't an abstract legal exercise. It was about freeing a world from a prison of gratitude. Lieutenant open a channel to the Zathi High Justicar. It's time we scheduled our preliminary hearing in the Aurora Court and inform the Kalinese government. Tell them to start compiling their own records. Every hour of lost labor, every delayed shipment, every child who goes to bed hungry because the gratitude tithe came first. She would not let their future be an entry in someone else's ledger. Yes, Commander Gia replied, her fingers flying across her console. The ship hummed with a renewed sense of purpose. The crew of the ledger were not warriors, but they were about to wage a war of numbers. A war where the only weapon was the truth meticulously recorded and publicly displayed. The Zathi had built a prison of debt. Rostova would turn it into a hall of mirrors. The reply from the Zathi flagship was swift. The High Justicar agreed to the hearing its message, dripping with condescending patience. It saw this as a minor delay, a procedural nuisance before the inevitable confirmation of its rightful claim. It did not yet understand that Rostova was not challenging the debt. She was redefining it. The court would not be a battlefield. It would be a classroom. And the first lesson would be on the true cost of a gift. As the ledger prepared for its journey to the court, a new set of calculations scrolled across the main view screen. Not weapon trajectories or shield frequencies, but expense reports and labor projections. It was humanity's quiet strength. They did not have the Zathi's ancient legal traditions or their overwhelming technological superiority, but they had a stubborn refusal to be intimidated by numbers. And they had a commander who knew that the most powerful weapon in the universe was a well-audited balance sheet. The Zathi believed in the sanctity of the ledger. Rostova would make them honor every single entry. This was how you fought gods who came bearing gifts. The journey to the Aurora Court was a blur of preparation. Rostova and her team worked tirelessly, poring over every piece of data the ledger could gather. They compiled a mountain of evidence, a testament to the hidden costs of the Zathi's benevolence. Kenji, the legal officer, was a whirlwind of motion, drafting motions and preparing arguments. He was in his element, a warrior whose battlefield was the intricate labyrinth of interstellar law. Their entire legal framework rests on the concept of unquantifiable gratitude, Kenji explained during one of their strategy sessions. They argue that the value of saving a species is infinite, and therefore any tithe, no matter how large, is a mere token. It's a powerful emotional argument. Rostova nodded, her gaze fixed on the star charts that papered the briefing room walls. Then we need to counter it with an equally powerful and quantifiable reality. The reality of the Zathi's own operational costs. We need to turn their argument on its head. If the value of the gift is infinite, then so is the value of the labor required to maintain it. The AI's voice chimed in its synthesized tone, a calming presence in the tense room. I have completed a preliminary analysis of the Zathi's energy consumption. Their fleet, the Mirror Array, and their administrative stations draw a combined total of 2.8 terawatts per cycle from the Kalin system. By my calculations, this represents 15% of the system's total energy output. The value of this energy at current market rates is staggering. Rostova allowed herself a small, grim smile. The numbers were even better than she had hoped. The law was not a shield. It was a scalpel, and she was ready to make the first cut. A message arrived from the Kalinese government. It was a simple data packet, a collection of stories and statistics. It told of families forced to choose between paying the gratitude tithe and feeding their children. It spoke of artists who could no longer afford to create, of scientists whose research had been defunded. It was a litany of small, everyday tragedies, the slow, grinding erosion of a culture under the weight of an impossible debt. Rostova had it translated and appended to their evidence file. The court would see the human cost of the Zathi's perfect accounting. They would not be judged by gods, but by their neighbors. As they neared the court's designated sector, the ledger passed through a corridor of law, a region of space where legal authority superseded all other concerns. It was a place of enforced neutrality, where even the most bitter enemies were compelled to coexist peacefully. Here, the only weapons allowed were words, and the only battles were fought in the sterile chambers of the court. Rostova felt a sense of calm settle over her. This was her arena. The Aurora Court itself was a magnificent structure, a vast crystalline station that glittered in the light of a dozen stars. It was a symbol of the galaxy's commitment to the rule of law, a place where justice, it was said, was as constant as the celestial spheres. As the ledger docked, Rostova could see the ships of 100 different species, a testament to the court's importance. Among them, sleek and imposing, was the Zathi flagship, the Abacus of Souls. Its crystalline hull seemed to absorb the light, giving it an air of cold, untouchable authority. The confrontation was about to begin, a battle of philosophies played out on a galactic stage. The Zathi High Justicar met them in the grand concourse of the court. It was an imposing figure, its crystalline form shifting and shimmering with an inner light. Its voice, when it spoke, was like the chiming of 1,000 tiny bells, a sound that was at once beautiful and unsettling. Commander Rostova, an unexpected pleasure. I confess I am curious as to the nature of your challenge. Our claim on Kalen is ironclad, a matter of settled law and public record. Rostova met its gaze without flinching. We are not here to challenge your claim, High Justicar. We are here to amend it. The Justicar's crystalline form stilled the light within it, dimming for a moment. To amend, an interesting choice of words. And what precisely do you propose to add to a record that is already complete? Your expenses, Rostova said simply. Your labor, your energy costs, the full unvarnished accounting of your gift. We believe the ledger as it stands is incomplete. We are here to help you balance it. For the first time, a flicker of something unreadable passed through the Zathi's multifaceted eyes. It was a look of surprise, quickly masked, but there nonetheless. Rostova knew then that she had struck a nerve. The Zathi, for all their meticulous accounting, had never considered the possibility that their own actions could be quantified, their own benevolence assigned a price tag. They had written the story of their generosity. Now she would write the epilogue. The preliminary hearing was held in a smaller, more intimate chamber, a prelude to the main event. It was here that the initial arguments would be made, the boundaries of the legal battlefield drawn. The chamber was circular, with the judge's bench at the center, a symbol of their impartiality. Rostova stood with her team on one side, the Zathi delegation on the other. A quorum of witnesses from a dozen neutral species observed from the galleries, their presence a reminder that this was not a private dispute. The galaxy was watching. The Zathi Legal Council, a being of pure energy contained within a shimmering containment field, began the proceedings. It spoke of the sanctity of a promise, the moral weight of a debt of gratitude. It painted a picture of the Zathi as selfless saviors asking for a mere pittance in return for the gift of life itself. It was a powerful, moving performance. When it was her turn, Rostova did not approach the bench. Instead, she addressed the gallery, her voice clear and steady. We do not dispute the Zathi's actions. They saved the Kalenese people, and for that they are owed a debt of gratitude, a real debt. But what is the nature of that debt? The Zathi claim it is infinite, unquantifiable, a moral obligation that can never be fully repaid. She paused, letting her words hang in the air. We disagree. We believe that every action has a cost, and every cost can be quantified. The Zathi have presented the galaxy with a ledger that tells only half the story of their gift. We are here to tell the other half, the story of their labor. This was the first stone cast in a pond of settled law. She then presented their initial findings, a summary of the ledger's audit, the energy consumption, the maintenance cycles, the fleet's operational costs. The numbers were stark, undeniable. The Zathi's pittance was in fact a significant portion of the Kalan system's total output. Their gift was a self-sustaining enterprise, a perpetual motion machine of debt and obligation. The Zathi Council was quick to rebut. The commander's argument is a fallacy, a cynical attempt to devalue an act of pure altruism. To assign a cost to our labor is to diminish its moral worth. Our actions were a gift, not a transaction. Rostova was ready. A gift, by definition, is given without expectation of reward. The Zathi have demanded a reward, a perpetual tithe. That is not a gift. It is a service, and a service has a price. We are not here to diminish the Zathi's actions. We are here to properly value them. The judges, a panel of 3 beings from different species, listened impassively. Their faces were unreadable, their thoughts their own. But Rostova could feel a subtle shift in the room's atmosphere. The seed of doubt had been planted. The Zathi's carefully constructed narrative of selfless benevolence was beginning to fray at the edges. They had built a house of cards on a foundation of unexamined assumptions. The hearing concluded with the judges agreeing to allow Rostova's team to conduct a full independent audit of the Zathi's operations in the Kalan system. It was a major victory, a crucial first step. The Zathi had been forced onto the defensive, compelled to justify their actions in a way they had never anticipated. They had expected a debate on the morality of gratitude. Instead, they were facing a full-scale financial review. As they left the chamber, the Zatha High Justikar approached Rostova again. The chiming of its voice was now sharp, discordant. "You are playing a dangerous game, Commander. You seek to reduce the sublime to the mundane, to replace the poetry of gratitude with the dull prose of accounting." Rostova met its gaze. "There is no poetry in a child's hunger-high Justikar. There is only the math of survival. And right now your numbers don't add up." The Zathi would learn that humanity's greatest strength was not its weapons, but its stubborn insistence on a fair price. Back on the ledger, the mood was cautiously optimistic. The first hurdle had been cleared, but the real work was just beginning. The audit would be a monumental task, requiring them to sift through mountains of Zathi data, to verify every entry, to cross-reference every claim. The Zathi would resist, of course, with every legal tool at their disposal. They would try to bury them in paperwork, to bog them down in procedural delays. But Rostova had an advantage. She had the ledger and AI designed for this very purpose, and she had a crew of dedicated professionals who believed in their mission. They were ready for the fight. "Begin the audit," she ordered, her voice echoing through the quiet bridge. "Let's see what's really written in the abacus of souls." The AI's light pulsed in acknowledgement. The game was afoot. A game of numbers and laws of gratitude and greed. A game that would determine the fate of a world and perhaps set a new precedent for the entire galaxy. A precedent that would prove once and for all that the gratitude of kings was not a collar of debt, but a contract that must be honored by both sides. The next few weeks were a relentless battle of attrition. The Zathi, true to form, buried the ledger's team in a blizzard of legal motions and data dumps. They provided petabytes of information, most of it irrelevant, a deliberate attempt to overwhelm and obscure. It was a classic delay tactic designed to exhaust their resources and their will, but they had underestimated the ledger. The AI sifted through the noise with tireless efficiency, its quantum processors identifying patterns and redacting extraneous data in microseconds. It was like watching a master weaver sort thread, turning a chaotic mess into a clear and understandable tapestry. The human crew worked in shifts, verifying the AI's findings, adding the human element of intuition and insight. Kenji was in his element, a legal pugilist, parrying every Zathi motion with a counter-motion of his own. "They're trying to drown us in procedure," he reported to Rostova. a weary but determined look in his eyes. They've filed a motion to have our audit declared an illegal search, a violation of their sovereign data. Rostova paced her ready room, the star-dusted void outside her viewport, a silent witness. And your response? I've argued that since their ledgers are public record, and their operations are conducted in Kalinese sovereign space, our audit is not a search, but a public inquiry, a verification of the public record as sanctioned by the court. It was a brilliant legal maneuver, turning the Zathi's own transparency against them. On Kalin, the news of the court battle had spread like wildfire. A new sense of hope, fragile but persistent, was taking root. Vignettes of defiance began to trickle in. A village that collectively refused to pay the gratitude tithe, instead sending a detailed record of their own labor, the hours spent tending the fields, maintaining the water purifiers, teaching their children to the human delegation. It was a small act of rebellion, but a powerful one. It showed that the Kalinese were no longer passive victims. They were participants in their own liberation. They had started to keep their own ledgers. The first major breakthrough came from a junior ensign named Tariq, a data analyst with a knack for seeing what others missed. He was reviewing the energy logs from the Zathi mirror array, a seemingly endless stream of numbers. But Tariq noticed a discrepancy, a small recurring anomaly in the power distribution. "Commander," he said, his voice buzzing with excitement as he patched his findings through to the bridge. "I've found something. Every 10th cycle, the mirror array diverts a small amount of energy, less than 1%, to a destination outside the Kalin system. The logs designate it as waste heat dispersal, but the energy signature is coherent. It's not waste heat, it's a directed energy transmission." Rostova leaned forward, her eyes locked on the data stream. "A transmission to where?" "I'm tracing it now," Tariq said, his fingers a blur across his console. A moment later, a new star chart appeared on the main screen, a line of light extending from the Kalin system to a distant, uncharted nebula. The destination is a Zatha sanctuary world, a private, uninhabited system. According to their public records, it's a place for meditation and spiritual reflection. The AI's voice cut in its tone flat, but the implications enormous. Based on the energy signature and frequency, the transmission is not for communication. It is a direct power transfer. The Zathi are using the Kalinese sun to power their private retreat. The bridge fell silent. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. They were not just taxing the Kalinese. They were stealing from them, siphoning off the very energy they claimed to be gifting, and hiding it under the guise of waste heat. This changed everything. This was not just a dispute over the terms of a contract. This was fraud. Rostova's voice was dangerously quiet. "Ledger, calculate the total amount of energy diverted since the Zathi's arrival in the Kalin system, and calculate its market value." The AI's response was immediate. "The total energy diverted is 4.2 zettajoules. The current market value is approximately 78 trillion credits." A collective gasp went through the bridge crew. It was a sum so vast it was almost meaningless. It was more than the entire economic output of a dozen systems combined. The Zathe had not just built a prison of debt. They had built it with stolen bricks. "This is it," Kenji said, his voice a reverent whisper. "This is the smoking gun. This is the crack in their perfect circle." He was right. This was more than enough to shatter the Zathi's image as selfless benefactors. This was proof of their hypocrisy written in the language they respected most, the language of numbers. Rostova felt a surge of cold, righteous anger. She had come to the Aurora court to argue a point of law. Now she was going to expose a crime. "Prepare a new filing for the court," she ordered, her voice like steel. "A motion to introduce new evidence. And send a copy to every news feed in the quadrant. It's time the galaxy saw the true face of the Zathi's gratitude." The public inquiry would now become a public trial. The revelation of the energy siphoning sent shockwaves through the Aurora court. The Zathi's carefully cultivated reputation for impeccable honesty was shattered overnight. The news feeds were ablaze with the story, and public opinion, once ambivalent, turned sharply against them. They were no longer seen as benevolent saviors, but as cunning exploiters. The Zathi High Justicar, in a rare public statement, dismissed the accusation as a gross misinterpretation of routine operational procedures. It claimed the energy transfer was a necessary part of the mirror array's maintenance, a way of balancing the system's energy load. But the lie was transparent. The data was undeniable. The judges of the Aurora Court, their impartiality now under intense scrutiny, fast-tracked the main hearing. The Zathi's attempt to drown the proceedings in procedural delays had backfired spectacularly. Now they were the ones on the defensive, their every action viewed through a lens of suspicion. This was the first major escalation, the point of no return. Before the main hearing, Rostova received another data packet from Kalin. It was a collection of personal testimonies, stories from individuals who had been directly affected by the gratitude tithe. A doctor who had been forced to ration medicine. A teacher whose school had been closed. An old man who had lost his family farm, a farm that had been in his family for generations. Each story was a small, sharp shard of pain, a testament to the human cost of the Zathi's greed. Rostova had them loaded into the court's public record, a silent chorus of witnesses to the Zathi's crimes. She wanted the judges to see the faces of the people whose lives had been upended by a legal fiction. The day of the main hearing arrived. The grand chamber of the Aurora Court was filled to capacity. Representatives from every major species were present, their faces a mixture of curiosity and concern. The case of the ledger versus the abacus of souls had become a referendum on the very nature of interstellar law. Rostova stood before the judges, the weight of a world on her shoulders. She began not with numbers but with the story of the Kalinese child who just wanted to see the stars again, without the silver lines of the Zathi's network in the way. She spoke of the doctor, the teacher, the farmer. She gave a human face to the abstract legal principles they were debating. Then she laid out the evidence piece by damning piece. The audit of the Zathi's operational costs, the testimony of the Kalinese people, and finally, the irrefutable proof of the energy siphoning. She presented it not as a lawyer making an argument, but as an auditor presenting a report. The facts spoke for themselves. The ledger was open for all to see, and its truth was undeniable. The Zathi came to Kalin as saviors, she concluded, her voice ringing with conviction. And for that they are owed gratitude. But gratitude is not a currency to be endlessly extracted. It is a bond to be honored. The Zathi have not honored that bond. They have exploited it. They have turned a gift into a weapon, a shield into a cage. They have built an empire of debt on a foundation of lies. She looked directly at the Zathi High Justicar, its crystalline form radiating a cold, furious energy. We are not asking for the debt to be erased. We are asking for it to be balanced. We are asking for the Zathi to be held to the same standard of accounting they demand of others. We are asking for the ledger to be made whole. Her final words hung in the air, a challenge and a promise. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the verdict. The Zathi's legal counsel offered a weak, blustering defense, but the damage was done. The numbers were undeniable. The truth was out. The court would not be swayed by pretty words when the math told a different story. The judges deliberated for 3 days. During that time, the ledger remained in orbit around the Aurora Court, a silent sentinel waiting for the outcome. The crew was on edge, a mixture of hope and anxiety. They had done all they could. Now it was in the hands of the law. On the 4th day, the verdict came. Rostova and her team assembled in the grand chamber one last time. The Zathi delegation was already there, their crystalline forms unnaturally still. The head judge, a being whose species communicated through a complex series of light patterns, began to issue the ruling. It was a complete and total victory. The court ruled that the tithe of gratitude, as it was currently structured, was an illegal and predatory contract. It declared that the Zathi had engaged in fraudulent and deceptive practices, misrepresenting their operational costs, and illegally siphoning energy from the Kalan system. The cost of their hypocrisy had finally come due. The ruling was not merely a slap on the wrist. It was a fundamental reordering of the legal landscape. The court ordered the immediate cessation of the gratitude tithe. It ordered the Zathi to pay restitution to the Kalanese people, a sum equal to the value of the stolen energy plus punitive damages. It was a debt so large it would cripple the Zathi for generations. But the most significant part of the ruling was the establishment of a new legal precedent, the Rostova Doctrine. It stated that any species offering aid to another in a time of crisis was entitled to fair compensation for their services, but not to a perpetual claim on the recipient's sovereignty or economy. It established a framework for compulsory arbitration and independent auditing in all such cases. It was a shield for the vulnerable, a check on the powerful. The gratitude of kings would no longer be a collar of debt. It would be a handshake between equals. On the main view screen of the ledger, the public ledger of the Aurora Court, blinked the new precedent locked into the permanent record. Confirmed. The Zathi's privileges in the sector were rescinded. Their method was outlawed. The court beacon, a pillar of light at the center of the station, cooled its work done. Rostova watched a quiet satisfaction settling over her. She thought of the Kalanese people, their future, now their own. She thought of her crew, their hard work and dedication. She thought of the small, quiet victory of numbers over narratives of truth over power. The cost had been high. The weeks of relentless work, the political pressure, the ever-present threat of a powerful and vindictive enemy. A junior officer had suffered a complete mental breakdown from the stress of the Zathi's data warfare, a casualty of a war fought with spreadsheets instead of torpedoes. Another cost was the diplomatic fallout. Several species sympathetic to the Zathi had recalled their ambassadors, a chilling of relations that would take years to mend. The wind felt earned but not clean. The AI's voice, soft and thoughtful, broke the silence. A new entry in the great ledger of the galaxy, Commander. A good entry. Yes, Ledger, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. A very good entry. She turned to leave the bridge, the quiet hum of the ship, a familiar lullaby. Her work here was done. But she knew that there would be other worlds, other Zathi, other legal fictions waiting to be unraveled. The fight for justice was never truly over. It was a constant, ongoing audit of the universe's balance sheet. And she and the Ledger would be ready. This is how we win. Not with fire and fury, but with patience and principle. We do not burn their worlds, we audit their books. We do not seek vengeance, we seek restitution. We hold them to their own standards, and in the bright, unforgiving light of the public record, we watch them condemn themselves. It is the quieter, harder way. But it is the human way, and the ledger will always be balanced. The victory felt hollow, the silence on the bridge heavier than the tension that had preceded it. A legal triumph was not a surrender. It was merely the end of one argument and the beginning of another. Rostova knew this. The Zathe were an ancient species, their empire built on the bedrock of contracts that spanned millennia. They would not be undone by a single ruling, no matter how righteous. They would adapt. They would comply. And their compliance, she suspected, would be a weapon in itself. The Kalanese government sends its profound gratitude. Commander Gia reported, her voice a mixture of relief and exhaustion. They are planning a day of celebration. They want to name it Rostova's Reckoning. Rostova shook her head, a frown creasing her brow. Tell them to hold their celebrations. A verdict is not enforcement. It's just paper. Monitor the Zathi fleet. Every ship, every transmission. I want to know the moment they flinch. For 2 days, there was nothing. The Zathi fleet remained in its blockade formation, silent and motionless. It was an unnerving stillness, the calm before a storm. On the 3rd day, it began. A message from the High Justicar, a model of polite capitulation. It informed the court and the ledger that the Zathi would begin paying the court-ordered restitution immediately. As the bulk of their debt was energy-based, they would transfer the required terawatts back to the Kalanese planetary grid. Their obedience was a sharper weapon than their defiance. On Kalan, the lights flickered. In the capital city of Alaris, a young technician watched his console with growing alarm. The planetary grid designed to handle a steady, predictable flow of energy was being flooded. "It's a surge," he yelled over the rising whine of the capacitors. "They're pushing it all at once. It's too much. The system can't handle this overload." The air in the control room grew thick with the smell of ozone as circuits began to fail. Power stations designed to receive energy were now being force-fed a deluge they could not contain. The lights across Alaris did not just come on, they exploded. On the Ledger's bridge, the reports came in a torrent. Widespread blackouts as substations overloaded and failed. Electrical fires in major cities. A breakdown of the planetary communications network. The Zathi were complying with the letter of the law, paying their debt with a fire hose of raw energy that was tearing the Kalanese infrastructure apart. They were not just paying a debt, they were salting the earth with it. "They're weaponizing the verdict." Kenji breathed, his face pale with fury. "It's malicious compliance. It's perfectly legal and it's devastating." Rostova watched the chaos unfold on the main screen, her jaw tight. She had won in the courtroom only to see her victory turned into a bludgeon against the very people she had sought to protect. This was the Zathi's answer, a lesson in the power of interpretation. They had been ordered to return what was stolen. The court had not specified the rate of return. The law could be a shield or a cage depending on who held the key. Ledger Rostova's voice was cold, precise. "Calculate the grid's tolerance limits. Project the cascading failure points. Give me a timeline to total system collapse." "The primary grid will fail in 12 hours, the AI responded instantly. "Secondary and tertiary systems will follow within 3 cycles. Complete infrastructure collapse is imminent. The Kalanese civilization will be set back decades. The cost in lives will be significant." This was their new attack, a war waged by accountants, where the ammunition was the settlement itself. Rostova had forced them to balance the ledger. They had chosen to do so by setting it on fire. The second escalation had begun. The legal victory was not the end. It was the trigger for a new, more insidious form of warfare. "Get me the High Justicar," Rostova commanded. The Zathi leader appeared on screen, its crystalline form, seeming to mock her with its calm, unruffled surface. "Commander Rostova, we are in the process of fulfilling our legal obligations. Is there an issue?" The chiming voice was smooth, a perfect mask of innocence. "You are destroying the world you claim to have saved," Rostova shot back, dispensing with pleasantries. "This isn't restitution. It's an attack. We are merely returning the energy, as the court decreed." The Justicar replied, the light within its facets pulsing gently. "It is not our fault if the Kalanese infrastructure is too primitive to receive it. Perhaps they should have considered that before they allowed you to argue on their behalf. Every transaction has terms, Commander. The consequences are part of the price." The logic was perverse, infuriating, and legally unassailable. "Cease the energy transfer," Rostova demanded. "We will arrange a payment schedule, a managed flow." The court's ruling did not specify a schedule, the Justicar chimed. It ordered payment. To delay would be a violation of the verdict, would it not? "We are simply being efficient. We wish to clear our debt as swiftly as possible. It was a perfect trap. To stop them would be to violate the very ruling she had fought so hard to win. To let them continue would be to condemn Kaelin to ruin. The Zathi had turned her own victory into a Gordian knot. She cut the connection, her mind racing. They were being outmaneuvered, caught in a web of their own making. Kenji is there than any legal recourse. An injunction, a motion to clarify the terms of the settlement. Kenji shook his head, his expression grim. They'll tie us up in court for months. By the time we get a ruling, there won't be a Kaelin to save. They're using the law's deliberate pace against us. Rostova turned to the AI. Ledger, what is the Zathi's endgame? This is more than spite. It's too calculated. What are they not telling us? My analysis is incomplete, the AI stated. However, the Zathi's actions are not those of a proud, defeated empire. Their haste, their willingness to expose themselves to further censure. It is suggestive of desperation. They are not merely paying a debt to Kaelin. They are behaving as if they are trying to meet a deadline for a much larger, more pressing obligation. A cold dread began to settle in Rostova's stomach. They had been so focused on the Zathi's relationship with Kaelin that they had never asked a simple question: who did the Zathi answer? To every creditor is also a debtor to someone else. The universe was not a temple, but a counting house with many floors. Just then, a priority alert flashed on Gia's console. Commander, long-range sensors are picking up something. A massive object moving at an impossible speed. It just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. On the main view screen, the image resolved. It was a ship, but that word was inadequate. It was a geometric monstrosity, a sliver of perfect, non-reflective black that seemed to drink the light of the surrounding stars. It was impossibly old, its design utterly alien. It radiated a silence that was more terrifying than any threat. The Zath fleet, for the first time since the Ledger's arrival, broke formation. Their ships moved to a defensive posture, a clear sign of fear. A single system-wide broadcast emanated from the black vessel. It was not a greeting or a threat. It was an invoice. The message was a stream of pure mathematics, a universal language. It was a demand for payment on a debt that was trillions of years old, a debt of energy and entropy that dwarfed anything the Zathi had ever claimed from Kaelin. The debtor was listed as the Zathi Collective. The collateral was listed as the Kaelin system and its star. The new ship was not a warship, it was a bailiff. The High Justicar opened a channel to the Ledger, its voice stripped of all its condescending calm. The chimes were frantic, discordant. You have to help us, Commander. They are the final reckoners, the auditors of the void. Our debt to them is ancient. Our tithes from 1,000 worlds like Kaelin were how we paid them. Your court ruling has made us default. Here was the final terrible reveal. The Zathi were not the masters of this cruel game. They were merely middle management. Their entire civilization was a pyramid scheme of obligation, and the auditors were at the top. The gratitude of kings was a collar of debt, and the Zathi's own collar was held by a power far greater than their own. Rostova stared at the black ship on her screen. They're here to collect the collateral. They will not communicate. They will not negotiate. The Justicar lamented. They only count. They will begin the asset seizure. They will attach a siphon to the star itself and drain it to the last jewel of energy. Your victory has doomed us all. The third escalation had arrived. This was no longer about a contract. It was about survival. The enemy was not malice, but a cold, implacable arithmetic that had come to collect. Rostova now faced a choice that went far beyond the law. She could watch the system die a victim of a cosmic bankruptcy proceeding. Or she could intervene and in doing so become entangled in a conflict that was not her own. Humanity's place in the universe had always been to balance the books one way or another. Ledger Rostova said, her voice a study in forced calm. Give me a solution. There are no military options, the AI replied. The auditor vessel's energy signature is beyond any scale we have ever recorded. Direct confrontation would be suicide. I am not a soldier, Rostova snapped. I am an accountant. Give me an accounting solution. A moment of silence filled only by the hum of the ship. Then the AI spoke again, its voice holding a new, almost imperceptible note of creative synthesis. The auditors are here to collect a debt. The Zathi are attempting to pay that debt by flooding the Kalinese grid with energy. The problem is the interface. The Kalinese grid is the wrong receptacle. Rostova's eyes widened as she understood. The energy isn't the problem. The destination is. She turned to the frantic image of the high Justicar. Your mirror array. The one you used to save this system. Can you reconfigure it? The Justicar's facets shimmered with confusion. Reconfigure it for what purpose? It is a shield, a focusing lens. We're not going to block the energy, Rostova explained the plan forming in her mind with crystalline clarity. We're going to catch it. All of it. The entire restitution payment you are dumping into Kalin. We will use your mirror array to catch that energy and redirect it. We are going to aim your payment at the auditors. It was the ultimate mirror justice maneuver. A system-scale accounting correction. They would use the Zathi's malicious compliance to pay the Zathi's own bill. The High Justicar was stunned into silence. The sheer audacity of the plan was beyond its comprehension. To use a debt payment as a direct funds transfer to a third party on a stellar scale, it was either madness or genius. It would require our cooperation. Our engineers would have to work with yours. The calculations are already being run by my ship's AI. Rostova cut in. The auditors are not an enemy to be fought. They are a creditor to be paid. We are going to give them exactly what they came for. The question is, will you help us, or will you stand by your pride while your entire civilization is repossessed? On the ground, the Kalinese people huddled in darkness saw a new light in the sky. The Zathi ships were moving, reconfiguring their orbital mirrors with a desperate newfound purpose. It was a sight that defied understanding. The oppressor and the liberator working in frantic unison against a silent, star-eating void. The choice had been made. Pride was a luxury the bankrupt could not afford. The next few hours were a crucible. On the bridge of the ledger, Rostova orchestrated a desperate symphony of logistics and engineering. Human and Zathi teams, bitter enemies just cycles ago, now worked in a tense but efficient partnership. The Zathi engineers knew the mirror array intimately, its tolerances and capabilities. The human crew, guided by the ledger, provided the raw processing power and the unorthodox thinking needed to turn a solar shield into a cosmic debit card. The alignment protocols are fighting us. Gia reported, her face slick with sweat. The array wasn't designed to handle a focused incoming energy stream of this magnitude. The High Justicar's voice, now patched directly into the ledger's command channel, was strained. My engineers say the emitter matrix will overload. The feedback could shatter the entire array. The ledger has devised a solution, the AI interjected calmly. It displayed a new set of equations on the main screen, a complex dance of harmonic frequencies and energy dampeners. By creating a controlled resonance cascade, we can convert the raw power into a modulated data stream. We will not be hitting the auditor's ship with a blast of energy. We will be transmitting a payment confirmation. It was a breathtakingly elegant solution. They would not shoot the bailiff. They would simply hand him the check. Kenji watched the readouts, his legal mind grappling with the implications. You're honoring the auditor's claim. You're using the Zathi's assets, the restitution payment, to do it. You're enforcing one verdict while settling a completely separate debt. This is not law. This is cosmic restructuring. The universe is a series of nested contracts, Kenji Rostova said, her eyes never leaving the main screen where the auditor vessel hung like a judgment. We're just calling the question on all of them at once. A civilian vignette from Kalen played on a side monitor. A family in a darkened apartment watching the sky. The father who had cursed the Zathi for years now found himself pointing out their ships to his daughter. "Look," he whispered, his voice filled with a strange awe. "The monsters are trying to build a shield for us." The child didn't understand the nuance. She just saw the lights in the sky working together, and for the first time in her life, it gave her hope. Hope was the only currency that could not be quantified. "We are ready," Commander Gia said, her voice tight. "The mirror array is aligned. The Zathi have begun to channel their full restitution payment into the collection matrix." Rostova took a deep breath. This was the moment. A single miscalculation, a single flaw in the ledger's audacious plan, and the entire system could be annihilated in a wave of uncontrolled energy. The cost of victory was always high, but the cost of failure here was oblivion. "Hi, Justikar," she said, her voice formal. "On my mark." "We are ready," the Zathi leader replied. The fear in its voice was now tempered with a sliver of something else, respect. Ledger Rostova commanded, "Execute." For a heart-stopping second, nothing happened. Then the space between the Zathi fleet and Kalen ignited. A torrent of pure white energy, the sum total of the Zathi's debt, erupted from their fleet. But instead of slamming into the planet, it struck the reconfigured mirror array. The massive structure groaned, glowing cherry red under the strain. The light bent, focused, and then shot outwards in a single, perfectly coherent beam. It was a lance of pure data, a river of light aimed directly at the heart of the auditor vessel. It struck the black, silent ship, and instead of exploding, it was simply absorbed. The non-reflective hull drank the beam as a desert drinks water. For an eternal minute, the beam flowed a silent, luminous transaction across the void. Then, as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The mirror array, pushed to its absolute limit, went dark, its delicate surfaces fractured and scorched. The Zathi ships floated, their energy reserves drained. The silence that followed was absolute. All eyes were on the auditor ship. Had it worked? Was it enough? The black vessel did not move. It simply hung in space, processing the massive influx of information. Then a new system-wide broadcast, as terse and emotionless as the first. It was a single mathematical symbol projected across the void. A symbol of a completed transaction. A receipt. Then, on the public ledger of the Aurora Court, a new entry blinked into existence, logged by the auditor's own inscrutable systems. It was a simple line item. Debtor Zathi Collective. Creditor Final Reckoning. Status paid. The court beacon miles away flickered in acknowledgement of the system-wide update. The mirror arrays their purpose served began to cool their scorched surfaces, ticking and groaning in the silence. The auditor ship, without a flicker of light or a whisper of engine power, turned. It folded space around itself and vanished, its business concluded. It had come. It had presented its invoice. It had been paid. The transaction was complete. On the bridge of the ledger, a ragged collective cheer went up. Gia was hugging Kenji. Tariq was staring at his console in disbelief. Rostova allowed herself to close her eyes for a single precious moment. She could feel the exhaustion in her bones, the weight of the last few hours pressing down on her. They had gambled everything on a single insane accounting maneuver, and it had worked. The High Justicar's image appeared one last time. Its crystalline form was dim, its energy clearly depleted. The chiming voice was quiet, stripped of all artifice. "You have saved us, Commander Rostova. You have honored a debt that was not yours, and in doing so you have freed us from a chain we have worn for eons. The concept of gratitude is something my people will need to study anew." The transmission ended. The Zathi fleet, Their long vigil over, began to withdraw from the system, leaving behind their broken mirror array as a monument to their folly and their salvation. The war of the ledger was over. The price had been a planet pushed to the brink, a command crew aged a decade in a day, and an alliance forged in the fires of mutual desperation. The victory was not in the defeat of an enemy, but in the balancing of a book that had been open for far too long. The Rostova doctrine had been tested and proven. Justice was not about punishment. It was about making things whole. We are humanity. We are not the strongest nor the oldest, but we are the keepers of the record. We believe that every action has a consequence, every debt must be paid, and every book must balance in the end. We will not be ruled by gods or monsters who hide their greed behind the language of gifts. We will bring our ledgers, our calculators, and our stubborn, unshakable belief in a fair price. And we will hold the line not with guns, but with numbers. For the universe itself is a public record,